YouTube, Awesome Rider here. Welcome to my review for BoonBoomger Episode 3. So this episode, I feel we're really settling into sort of the status quo of the series. Still very much enjoying it personally. I wasn't as hyped about this episode as the initial first 2-week hype, but I personally am still much enjoying the show. It feels almost very kind of comforting and just entertaining. I don't know, I've obviously looked forward to King Oger and really liked it, but I also definitely felt the whole gotta watch this for the review thing, and I obviously still feel that here because, hello, filming a review. But I also feel just genuinely more excited to watch it. I think it's just because it's new, but very much feeling like we're settling into the status quo. In terms of, I think that so far they have a pretty good balance of, it doesn't feel as innovative as something like Dawn Brothers or King Oger, but a good balance of your classic Sentai formula of monster shows up, this is the monster's mode of operation, defeat him, grows big. But I think with some of the infrastructure of the show, with the whole delivery thing, and just some of its presentation, makes it feel like it has a bit of its own flair, which is nice. And I have to say that I am decently intrigued by some of the stuff going on. There isn't any outright super serialized mysteries, but there's stuff in the world I'm curious to see, like what happens. Like in general, I'm going to be curious to see how Orange and Black eventually get powered up and how they fold in. But also I'm curious about how Taya and Boom Boom met, what their dream is, because like at the beginning they're working on the new auxiliary and they say that we're one step closer to the dream. Honestly, based on the trailers and the early information, it seemed like just generically the alien landed and gave them the powers, but it seems like they worked on it together, and for what purpose and what the purpose is going to evolve into, I'm actually really interested in, to be honest. I think it's really cool. And I also do like, as people have pointed out in the comments of my last review, it is kind of interesting that this is a Sentai where the BoonBoomger's sole purpose isn't just defending the city or the world like usual. You have this whole other operation with the delivery system, and it almost feels like that's their priority, which is rather interesting. So the main kind of hook of the episode is Pink winds up taking a job to bring this broken mirror to this kid's grandmother, and it's kind of about her delivering it all episode while the villains send out this clock monster, which is probably my favorite design so far. And there's some funny stuff within it. Like there's a scene where Pink just straight up drives past like a battle scene, and then later when she shows up again when she gets lost during the fight, Red thinks that she's purposely being a decoy to distract him, because he's very much into her, like thinking like, oh, she's gonna be like the next prodigy of our team, which is funny because it almost feels meta, because we find out she wasn't trying to be a decoy. She legit was being unobservant about it and was legit just trying to get to the delivery. And then he's like, that's why I like you. It feels meta because it feels like that's the way Toku Reds are usually observed. They act like absolute thundering loonies, and everyone's like, God, that's why they're so great. I'm like, well, they're not great, they're nuts. And that's what it feels like, where she's like kind of screwing up and being silly, and he's like, man, she's great. So I feel like that might get annoying at some point. I'm curious if this is going to go somewhere more meaningful or if it will just be funny. But it is kind of meta, and it was admittedly funny in this episode. Like, I loved the scene of her just driving through the fight, and the fact that she really was just trying to make the delivery and wasn't trying to be a decoy. Although, admittedly, it was weird that like the route she took her through a classic Toku fight quarry. But I don't know, the stuff with the humor of it mostly felt fun to me. The stuff with the villains this week definitely felt very Team Rocket, like, you know, them getting yelled at by Giovanni for not doing good enough. I mentioned that last week, but the scene in this week's episode in particular, very Team Rocket coded, as the kids would say. Black Ranger gets involved again this week in terms of just kind of being involved with what the monster did, but this time he's there to witness the Tire Rangers. And I'll admit, I mean, we've only seen him a couple times. He's getting on my nerves a little bit, and I'm a little bit worried about that. But at the very end, he does get something interesting where that new Inspector character shows up. She was in the previews, and I honestly forgot about her because she doesn't show up until the very end of the episode. And she seems like she's going to be investigating the BoonBoomgers and is going to be bringing Black into the storyline. I'm really curious about that. I think that's actually going to be a rather interesting dynamic. And I'd be curious to see how this will lead to Black being involved in the Ranger world. I'm really curious if his powers are going to come from like the BoonBoomgers. They're gonna somehow come from this lady. It was like a rival organization somehow, which I doubt, but I couldn't help but think about that just because this is the way we're getting him involved in that. So that was kind of interesting to see him getting involved based off of his involvement with this storyline. But I'll admit, like, his antics aren't the funniest, and I've gotten a little tired of his shtick. Meanwhile, you know, I'm liking the Orange Ranger so far and his attitude, and I am curious, like, if he already has his powers or not. Like, that's going to depend on where the second set of powers comes from, because he is part of the organization, and I could see it going either way, where we have an episode where he gets powers finally, or I could see it happening where he already has Ranger powers and just pulls them out. You know how it is. This was, as I said, also the debut of our first auxiliary mecha, and I have to say I do like that we have those kind of like racing sequences before, but it's only 3 episodes in, and thus far it feels a little bit repetitive in terms of just adding an extra aspect to the formula, and I don't mind seeing those in general, but I hope we change it up in the future. Like I think I said in the pilot review, I wouldn't mind if just the whole sequence at one point was a race. So like I don't mind them existing, but thus far it's been kind of the same thing over and over again, and I'm starting to see a pattern form. But the auxiliary is just simply like a sword weapon, and I really like the way that they're pacing this so far. Like, I feel some of the other series, both Rider and Sentai, have been so rushed recently that if this was doing a similar approach to those, we would already have the night form and a preview for like the police form next week. And I appreciate that, I mean, this is 3 episodes in, that's pretty early in, but I feel that within the first 2 episodes, we kind of let everything that was introduced at the core breathe, like the main rangers, the main mecha, and the fact that this is just one weapon and not a full-on formation, I don't know, and it looks like next week's episode, which I'll talk about in the preview clip episode video, but it doesn't look like we're debuting anything next week, so I'll be curious to see how everything rolls out. Again, car puns. Also, I just noticed this week that Taya's name is like Tire. I'm the dumbest boy in school. I'll be curious to see how, when everything rolls out in terms of the Orange and Black Ranger and auxiliaries, how it feels, because thus far, it feels weird to say that it doesn't feel rushed because it's only 3 episodes in, but it really doesn't feel rushed. I think that for me, King Odra felt more rushed in terms of debuting certain things, so I'm really pleasantly surprised with that. But yeah, overall, still quite enjoying the show. I think it has a pretty nice balance of quirky humor, some classic Sentai action, a little bit of its own identity, and some coolness. As that was one thing I was going to say, as I've seen some people say, oh, it's like the next Car Ranger. It's like, not really. Car Ranger was almost full-on parody. This definitely has some sillier stuff, but as I said in the last 2 weeks' reviews, some of the humor surprises me with not just being honk in your face over the top. It's actually kind of like silly slapstick-ish, but with some clever funniness to it, and there's a surprisingly cool vibe to the show. Like, I thought it would just be completely silly too, but with the way Taya behaves and just the way they present themselves, like, it's definitely a cheesy coolness, but there's much more of a cool vibe than I would have expected from a series like this. I want to know what you guys think. Do you feel that way? Do you think it's way more silly and more Car Ranger-like, or do you feel that kind of cool vibe as well? But let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell to get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.